that, let me get started. As Adesh said, I'm a risk management expert, and I've been involved in risk management for 35 years. I started when I was very young, you see, that's a joke. The reason I'm still involved in risk management is because I believe it works. So where are we in risk management today? There's wide agreement on the basics of risk management. We understand the principles, we understand the process, we understand the tools. And so people really know what risk management is about in the world of projects and programs, and also more widely. And it's quite commonly practiced. All industries, all project types, most countries. So I guess that means that everything is fine in the world of projects and programs because risk management is working. But maybe not. I'm sure you're familiar with the chaos data produced some years ago by the Standish Group. Actually, they stopped producing it in 2015, but here we have 20 years of data from 1994 until 2015, showing they categorize projects into three categories, three groups: those that have outright succeeded in meeting all of their objectives, those which have failed, and those which are challenged in between, which have failed to meet one or more of their objectives. And you'll see that things really haven't changed very much in the last 20 years. And we're still at the same kind of position where 20%, 1/5 of all projects in the world fail, and about half of them are challenged in not meeting at least one of their objectives. This is not very good. And risk management is supposed to help us. Risk management is the driver for project success. At least that's how we sell risk management, because projects we know are risky and we have to manage the risk. Risk management helps us to focus on objectives. It gives us a proactive approach to make sure that we can see things coming in advance and respond while we have the opportunity to address things. It gives us that space to manage and creates a focus on the things that really matter. But still we find our projects and our businesses are failing. What's the problem? I think the problem is that we're focusing on the wrong things in risk management. There's a focus on what I call the 3 T's: techniques, tools, and training. And if you go to most project risk management training courses, these are the things that they'll talk about. You read most project management books, you look in bodies of knowledge, this is what you'll see. You'll see a whole set of risk management techniques. And of course, we do need to know how to manage risk. We do need techniques like brainstorming and risk registers and Monte Carlo and all those other things. Of course we do. And we need tools to support those techniques, and some of those tools are very powerful. So yes, of course, we do need things to support the techniques for managing risk. And we need to know how to use the tools and operate the techniques. So we do need training as well. These things are necessary, but they're not enough. They're not sufficient. We need something else, because risk management somehow is still not helping us to make sure that our projects and businesses succeed, as we've seen from the Standish data. So I think the 3 T's are not enough. We do need to have those things, but there's something else. I'd like to suggest to you in this presentation that the thing that is missing is a 4th T. The 4th T is thinking. Of course, we need techniques and tools and training, but we need to think. We need to think risk. And the title of this presentation is Developing a Mature Risk Mindset. How we think is really important. Why is that? Well, clearly risk management is designed to manage risk, but risk is not managed by a process. Risk is not managed by tools and techniques. Risk is managed by people, and how we think determines what we do. How we think about risk determines how we try to manage it. And if our thinking is limited or wrong, then our management of risk will be ineffective. If we don't have the right concept or the right understanding of risk, if we're thinking in the wrong way, we won't be able to manage risk effectively, even if we have the right techniques and tools to support them, and we've been on lots of training courses. So in this presentation about the risk mindset, I'd like to talk to you about how you think about risk. And when you hear that word risk, either in the context of projects and programs, or more broadly, maybe in the context of health and pandemics, or maybe in the context of the financial markets and your investments, or maybe in terms of your health and your personal future, what does that word risk make you think? For a lot of people, the word risk brings up these sorts of thoughts. Risk means trouble. Risk means headaches. Risk is a waste of time worrying about things that will never happen. It's unnecessary. Risk stops us making advances in our business and being innovative, and risk costs us. Do you think like that about risk? if you read the texts, you read the books and the bodies of knowledge, you get a different view of risk, which says that risk is what we need to know that we don't currently know. Risk is helping us to do the things that we need to do that we're not currently doing and giving us early warning about those things. Risk is not about business prevention, but about business enabling through managed risk taking, creating value through spend to save investment. So maybe one or other of these columns registers with you. Just you say, yeah, you know, I think a little bit of this and a little bit of that. I'm not quite sure really what I do think about risk. Let me suggest to you that underlying these kinds of statements is a mindset, is a way of thinking about risk. And I would like to challenge that thinking about risk in this presentation. I'd like to introduce to you what I call the risk mindset. And the risk mindset is a more mature way of thinking about risk. And I'd like to suggest to you that this is based on 6 core values and beliefs. And I'm going to introduce those 6 core values and beliefs to you in a moment and go through them in this presentation. I would like you, as you hear each one, to challenge yourself and to say, do I think about risk like this or not? And if I do, how does that shape my view of managing risk? And if I don't, how does that influence my view of managing risk? And in the Q&A, I've placed a question to ask you, which of the 6 core values do you think is most important? And I would be very interested in your perspective. And also, if you think there's more, if you think it's more than 6, then do please tell me, because this is the first time I've made this presentation, and I'm very keen to learn from you guys as well. So what are these 6 core values and beliefs? Let's just put them on the screen in summary, and then we'll talk about them in a little more detail. First of all, risk is natural. Secondly, risk is manageable. Risk matters. Not all risk is bad. My risks are my responsibility, and it's really essential to be proactive in dealing with risks. Risk is natural and manageable and matters. Not all risk is bad. My risks are my responsibility, and proactivity is essential. Well, let's look at these in turn. Let's unpack them slowly. Risk is natural. If you look around the world, you see risk everywhere. It's like in this little picture, there are question marks raining down on us all the time. And life is risky. It's risky in the natural environment. If you go for a walk in the forest or in the desert or in the jungle, if you swim in the sea, if you climb the mountains, if you encounter wild animals or insects or even viruses, I guess, risk is everywhere. It's part of the natural environment in which we live. And we've learned this VUCA acronym, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, is natural in the world that we live in. And so we can't avoid risk. We can't say, oh, well, I don't really want to engage with risk. I'm a good planner. I'm a good project manager. I'm a good program manager. I'm a wise person. I'll avoid risk and I can just live my life without it. No, risk is natural. It's part of the environment that we live in. We cannot avoid it. Secondly, risk is manageable. If risk is everywhere we turn, sometimes it makes us feel a bit victimized. It's like, whatever happens, it just always seems to go wrong. It just seems to be something that I hadn't seen, something unexpected. Some virus comes up that we weren't ready for, which perhaps we should have been ready for, but that's another story. Something happens, some accident, some incident. And I'm just a victim of these circumstances. I'm a victim of uncertainty, a victim of risk. It's constantly out to get me, and I just can't do anything about it. Well, that's not true. And as we've learned through our professional approach to risk management, professionalizing it through techniques and tools and training, through processes and bodies of knowledge, there are things we can do to manage risk. Yes, risk is natural and part of the environment that we live in, but that doesn't just mean we have to roll over and be hit by everything that comes in our direction. No, we can engage with risk and manage it. And we don't have to be victims, we can be victors. We can see risk coming, and before it arrives, we can do something to avoid or minimize those bad things. We can do something to capture or exploit those good things. We can do something about it. We can influence the probability or the frequency of uncertain events occurring. We can influence their potential impact through protection and prevention. There are things we can do in order to manage the risk that surrounds us. And the choice of whether to be victim or victor is up to us. It's in our minds. It's how we think about risk. If I think there's nothing I can do and I just have to roll over and accept whatever the world gives me, I'll be a victim, and I'll be constantly recovering and chasing and trying to get back where I should have been all along. Or I can say, no, I'm going to engage with risk and do something about it. And I'm going to choose to be engaged. It's your choice, and it starts with the choice you make in your head. So yes, risk is natural, but risk is also manageable. We don't have to be victims of risk and uncertainty. And thirdly, risk matters. You might say, well, I'm a professional project manager or a program manager or a business manager. I know the important thing to me is to focus on my goals and objectives, to get my planning right, to deal with my resources, to have effective change management, to make sure I communicate clearly, to make sure I'm a good leader. All of these things matter. Risk management, it's a bit technical, it's a bit kind of detailed. I've got people who deal with that for me, and I don't really need to worry about that. I don't think that's true. I think risk really matters. And of course, I've dedicated my life to that. So I guess you'd expect me to say that. But why do I think that risk matters? Well, to understand that, we need to go back to our first principles in terms of defining what risk really is. And I'd like to do that with this very simple question. Is it true that risk is the same as uncertainty? And the answer, of course, is it's not true. All risks are uncertain, but not all uncertainties are risks. How many uncertainties are there in the world? Well, of course, it's a silly question. We don't know. Infinite, maybe. Certainly thousands, millions, billions. How many risks are there in your risk register? Are there thousands or millions or billions? Of course not. There's maybe 20, 50, 100. It depends on the size of your project, but certainly not millions or billions. Somehow we filter the world of uncertainty and decide that some uncertainties are risks. How do we decide? What is the filter that we put on this big uncertain world to say, out of these billions of uncertainties, these are the ones that I will name as risks. I'll make sure I understand them. I'll analyze them and assess them, and I'll respond to them and manage them. How do I decide which uncertainties are risks? And I'd like to offer you 3 words to help you decide. Risk is uncertainty that matters. We don't care about the uncertainties that don't matter, the things that may or may not happen, but have no impact on us, that can't affect my project or my program or my business or my personal life or my family. I don't care about those things. What I care about is the uncertainties that can affect my project, my program, my business, my personal life or my family. I want to know what are the uncertainties that matter. And how do I know what uncertainties matter? The uncertainties that matter are the ones that, if they occur, could affect my objectives. Objectives are the things we're trying to achieve, and risks are the uncertainties that could affect the things I'm trying to achieve if they occurred. Those are the things I need to understand, identify, understand and assess, understand and try and manage. Those are the risks to put in my risk register and to talk to other people about. So risk really matters. I personally believe that risk is the difference between success and failure in projects, in business, and in our personal lives, because we plan to succeed. And if we could just plan to succeed and then execute our plan perfectly, well, we would succeed every time. But as we've seen from the Standish data a moment ago, we don't succeed every time, at least not in the worlds of projects and programs or business or anywhere else, actually. And the reason that we don't succeed is because things happen that weren't in the plan. Things divert us or distract us from the plan. If we had seen those things in advance and could have planned for them and put them in the plan, then we wouldn't have been diverted and we would have been more likely to achieve our goals. Those things that we didn't see, that were uncertain before but happened and diverted or distracted us, those are risks. And our ability to manage risk is directly correlated to our ability to succeed in achieving our objectives. So risk matters. Well, we've had 3 of our 6. Risk is natural, risk is manageable, and risk matters. Let's move on to something else really important, and you'll know that this is one of my personal interests and emphases. Not all risk is bad. Is that how you think? Let's just unpack this with the question, if risk is uncertainty that matters, what kind of impact matters to you as a project or program manager? Are you only interested in things that could hurt you, things that could delay you, things that could damage reputation, things that could destroy performance or destroy value? Of course not. You're also interested in uncertainties that, if they occur, could help you to save time, save money, enhance performance, improve reputation, create value. If you've ever heard me speak before, you might have seen this little picture of the mouse, who I believe is the perfect risk manager. Because here we have a mouse facing a situation of considerable uncertainty. And we have to ask ourselves, what is the mouse's objective and what kinds of impact matter to the mouse? So the mouse's objective here is clearly to feed himself and to get strong and healthy. And he faces at least 2 types of impact that matter. The first is that he's spotted there's a trap. And so he's prepared himself by putting his helmet on and going very carefully. And of course, we have to do that in our projects and programs, in business and in life. We have to see the things that could hurt us and protect ourselves and go carefully. Good mouse, good risk manager. But there's another impact, another outcome which matters to the mouse, which is also uncertain. It's not just the trap that he's focused on. It's the cheese. That's his real focus. That's uncertain. He's asking himself, will I spring the trap? But he's also asking himself, will I get the cheese? And that really matters to him. And so he has to make sure that he not only doesn't spring the trap and doesn't get hurt, but he also does get the cheese and is fed. We have to manage both types of uncertainty in our projects and programs. Uncertainties that matter because they could hurt us, we call those threats. A threat is a negative risk, a downside risk, a risk with a harmful impact. And we have to see those things and protect ourselves. But we also have to manage the risks that could help us achieve our goals. We call those opportunities. They're uncertain, they may or may not happen, but if they do happen, they save time, save money, improve performance. We have to see those and manage those too, both at the same time. And so under this heading of the risk mindset, the way we think about risk, we have to recognize that managing risk, it does mean preventing potential problems, of course, but it also means capturing potential benefits, seeing the things that could help us and making sure that they do help us. So it's really important in our thinking, because thinking will affect how we behave, that we recognize that not all risk is bad. It's the 4th key value in the risk mindset. What's the 5th one? Well, who's going to do all this risk management? If we're recognizing that risk is uncertainty that matters, if risk is natural and everywhere around us, if risk is part of our business environment and it really matters, who's going to take care of it? A lot of people think, well, it's not me. I've got a risk manager for that, or a risk coordinator, or a risk facilitator, or a risk somebody. I'm sorry, that's actually not the right answer. The right answer is, it's you. Why is that? And it's to do with connecting risks with objectives. If I have objectives, if I'm a project manager, maybe if I'm just a technical manager or a task manager or just a team member, I have objectives to be achieved. Maybe I'm a chief executive. Certainly in my private life, I have objectives I want to achieve. My objectives are affected by uncertainty. Uncertainty that affects objectives create risk. So if they're my objectives, any uncertainty that affects my objectives is my risk. It's something I should care about. It's something I should know about. It's something that I should personally manage because they're my objectives. I'm responsible for my objectives, and so I'm responsible for my risks. And that means personal responsibility, taking responsibility for my risks. You cannot avoid responsibility for risks if you own objectives. And let's face it, we all own objectives. We all have things that we're required or we're trying or we want to achieve. Whether we're a big program manager on a mega program or whether we're a task manager or an activity manager just working on a team, whoever we are, we have objectives to be achieved. Each of those objectives can be affected by uncertainty, creating risk. My objectives mean it's my risk. If it's my risk, I have to manage it. So when we're thinking about risk ownership, the risk owner is not the risk manager. The risk owner is the person who owns the objectives. And some of the time, that's going to be me. So we do have to recognize that. What's the last element, the last value in the risk mindset? It's this: proactivity is essential. We might recognize that risk is natural and surrounds us, and it could be manageable, and it really matters. We might recognize that not all risk is bad, and I own risks. But if I recognize all those things, then just sit back and say, well, let's just wait and see what happens. Let's just see what risks actually do turn up, and I'll deal with them then. It will be too late. Many risks can only be dealt with in advance. And risk management is a forward-looking radar. It scans the future. It says what's out there coming in my direction. And some of the things that you see on a radar might be fuzzy and not very well defined. But you can see them, see how big they are, and see what direction they're traveling and how fast they're coming. If you see something over here, which is a big bad thing heading towards your project, you have the opportunity to do something about it when you see it, not waiting till it arrives. You could move out of the way and let the risk pass you by. You could erect some barriers to stop it coming. You could protect yourselves so that if it does arrive, you're ready for it. So it's important for us to scan the future and see the big bad things with enough time to do something about them. But we might also over here see some big good thing, which is glowing out there in the future, not very well defined, and it's kind of drifting in our direction. But if it goes on the track it's on, it's just going to drift past us and we'll miss it. If we see that good thing in advance, we could move over and make sure that it comes to us. We could prepare ourselves to receive it. We could be prepared to capture it. It's important for us to be proactive in managing both threats and opportunities so that we're best prepared to deal with the uncertainty as it arises. And being proactive is really, really important. It's part of the mindset that leads to effective management of risk. Well, I've been through the 6 elements of the risk mindset. Maybe I've been through them too quickly, but don't forget that Q&A panel on the right-hand side for you to raise your questions. Let me just finish with a few final thoughts, and then I can leave some time for discussion and questions. So here are my final thoughts. Why does this matter? Why is the risk mindset important? Well, here are some ABC thoughts. Attitude affects action. Beliefs shape behavior. Our culture influences conduct. It's absolutely basic, ABC. How we think determines what we do. And we saw this slide earlier on. How we think about risk determines how we manage it. What we said right at the beginning of the presentation was that if our concept of risk is limited, our management of risk will be ineffective. But if our concept of risk is accurate, then we will be able to manage our risks effectively. And that's really what we want, because risk is natural. Risk can be managed, risk matters, because my risks are my responsibility and they're not all bad. And I need to be proactive. I need to think right about risk so that I can act effectively towards it. So it really matters how we think. So how do we go about adopting this risk mindset? You may be convinced that these 6 values and beliefs are important. I hope you are convinced, because that's what I've been trying to do for the last half hour. If you're convinced, what are you going to do about it? How do you adopt the risk mindset? So first of all, be clear what it is. Risk is natural. We've got to accept that. Risk is all around us. Don't fight against it. Don't believe that somehow you're such a professional project or program manager that you can avoid risk and you're kind of above risk. It's not going to happen to you. No, risk is part of the environment we work in. But you must always seek to influence risk. Do something about it. Risk is around us, but it can be managed, and it needs to be managed because risk matters. And so in our behavior, we need to focus relentlessly on our objectives. That's all that matters in our projects and programs, are the objectives that we have to achieve, both the hard objectives And the soft objectives. There are soft objectives including stakeholder satisfaction, including team motivation, including building experience in our organization and learning, creating lessons for the future. All of our objectives are important and they're all affected by risk. We need to focus on the objectives. So in terms of our thinking, recognize the reality that you can't have a zero risk project. Your project will be affected by risk, but you can do something about it, and that you must do something about it because it could affect your objectives. In terms of adopting the risk mindset, don't forget the good risks. Remain alert to both opportunities and threats. Go looking, go hunting for those upside risks, the uncertainties that if they occurred would save you time and money, the risks that will be nice surprises that maybe you can capture and make them happen, the risks that you can improve before they arise so that they do you the most good. Remain alert to the best opportunities as well as the worst threats. And that's a behavior that comes from a way of thinking. Don't pass risk ownership to somebody else. If it's your objectives, they're your risks. If they're your risks, they're your responsibility. So we need to own that. I need to say, even if I'm a chief executive or some really important person in my organization, do you know what? Some of those risks belong to me, because some of those objectives belong to me and those risks affect those objectives. I will own the uncertainties that affect my objectives. And lastly, do something. A lot of risk management is analysis. And what we do is we identify risks and we assess them, probability and impact. We might do some Monte Carlo simulation. We write the results down in our risk register and we issue a risk report. And we decide on some actions and we put those in the risk register. And then we do nothing. And then our risk register sits on the shelf. And a month later, we think, oh, risk management. Take the risk register off the shelf, blow off the dust, have a look and see, oh, I was going to do that, but I didn't. Oh, and this risk happened. That's not risk management. That might be risk analysis or risk assessment, but risk management is managing the risk, which requires doing something different, taking action. We need to turn analysis into action. Otherwise, we'll never manage the risk. So these kinds of behaviors come out of these thought processes, these values and beliefs about risk, recognizing that risk is everywhere and trying to do something about it because of our objectives, looking for the upside as well as the downside and taking ownership of risks and actually taking action to change our risk exposure. Well, let me suggest 4 steps that you could take in order to adopt the risk mindset and build these behaviors in yourself, in your team, and in your organization. 4 first steps. The first is to think differently, to train your mind, to build new thinking habits. If you don't have some of these 6 values in your current mindset, you'll need to develop them. You'll need to think about them and remind yourself and to put them into your consciousness. You'll need to build new habits. I suggest if you identify 1 or 2 of these aspects of the risk mindset which you currently don't have, pick one and work on it and remind yourself and think about it and look at the implications on your behavior and keep working on it until it becomes natural, and then move on to one of the others. Build new habits in your thinking. You know, when you first think something different, it feels a bit uncomfortable and you think, oh, well, that's a strange thought. I don't know how to act on that. And then you think it again and you think, oh, yeah, I've thought this before. This feels a little bit more familiar. The more you think about something, the more it becomes a natural process. In your brain, of course, when you think, it's actually a connection of neurons. They fire a little electrical impulse. And everywhere there's an electrical impulse, there's a resistance. And so when you first have a new thought, there is resistance along that path because it's never been fired by those neurons in that pathway before. But the second time you think the same thought, the resistance on that pathway is reduced. And the third time and the fourth time, until eventually when you have the trigger thought, the pathway is easy to follow. It becomes a habit, and we can train ourselves to think new habits about risk. Try it, it works. Here's a second suggestion. Look for emotional intelligence. Develop emotional intelligence or emotional literacy. Emotional intelligence is a kind of buzzword. We hear it a lot, so we've heard it for the last 20 years, I guess. but it is an important aspect of leadership and in fact of personal character development. Emotional intelligence, I like to think about it in a way that I've developed with Dr. Ruth Murray Webster, who's speaking on a Wednesday. Together, we've come up with a system that we call the 7 A's of emotional intelligence, 7 steps to developing emotional intelligence. And each step starts with an A. Just briefly, the first is awareness. What's going on? Appreciation. Where did that come from? Why am I thinking that? Awareness and appreciation, followed by assessment. Is this helping me or not? And then the 4th A depends on the assessment. So awareness and appreciation. Assessment, if it's helping me, then I accept it. I say, okay, this is the way I think and I'm going to act accordingly. But if my assessment says this is not appropriate, then I need to assert the need for change and take action to change. So I have 2 branches after assessment. It's either acceptance or it's appraisal and action, followed by assertion and action, followed by appraisal to say, is this still appropriate? I think maybe Ruth might talk about this later. So be aware of how you're thinking. Check regularly, is this appropriate? And if not, adjust where necessary. Change your thinking through emotional intelligence. One thing that will really help you is to get help from others. Find a coach, find a mentor, find somebody who's further down the track than you, who can act as a trusted friend, as a mirror, as a reflector, to say, do you know what, your behavior in this particular risky situation is not necessarily helping you to achieve your goals. Have you thought about why that might be? Have you thought that maybe you could change your thinking in this area in order to get a different outcome? Have you considered maybe this is not healthy thinking? Why not adopt this element of the risk mindset? We can, through coaching and mentoring, or through just conversation with other senior trusted friends, find a way to adjust ourselves with help from outside. And finally, be intentional. This won't just happen by chance. What we need to do is intentionally recognize that my thinking about risk might be flawed, it might not be mature, there might be some values or beliefs that I hold that are not helping me to manage risk effectively, and I need to change them, and I'm going to. It won't just happen. We need to choose to change. And so you might be familiar with the idea of the conscious competence cycle, that first of all, we are unconsciously incompetent. We don't know what we can't do. But if we try something new, usually we find it's a bit difficult. We call that conscious incompetence. I'm aware that I can't do this. And so we intentionally learn how to do it. We become consciously competent. We can do it if we think about it. Until eventually the goal is we can do it without thinking about it. Unconscious competence. And you might think about perhaps learning to drive as an example. You put a child in a toy car and he thinks, I can drive the car. He doesn't know that he can't drive a real car. He is unconsciously incompetent. But when you have a teenager who decides they need to learn to drive a real car, you put them in their first lesson and they have no idea what to do. They are consciously, painfully aware of their incompetence. So they have some lessons and they can learn how to change gear and how to steer and look in the mirror and be aware of other drivers. They can learn what it feels like when they're moving at a particular speed. They are consciously competent if they think about it. And now for most of us who have been driving for some time, we jump in the vehicle and we just go. And we don't even think about changing gear or our position on the road. Maybe we should, of course, that's another question. But we can be intentional in developing these new thinking habits. And I would recommend that we try that. Well, I've been talking for probably long enough, maybe too long. You might decide that. Let me just leave you with this thought. We need to think risk, and we need to think risk correctly. It's really important because how we think affects how we behave. Attitudes affect actions. Beliefs affect behavior. Culture affects conduct. And so we have to get this right. As we look forward to the other elements of the risk stream in this conference, as you go back to your projects and programs and you look at your risk register or you think about your next risk workshop, challenge your own thinking. Challenge it against these 6 values and beliefs. See if there are areas where you need to change your thinking and then do something about it so that you can manage risk effectively. The management of risk is perhaps the most important thing you can do because of its correlation with success in projects, programs, and business. We really need to get this right, and I recommend this as an approach for you to try. Well, thank you very much for your attention. I'm going to stop the screen sharing in just a moment and look at the Q&A. I do hope there have been some Q&A. I'm going to put my glasses back on so I can see the questions. And if you want to contact me, here are my contact details. I'm very happy to take contact outside of the conference. Feel free to email me. Feel free to engage through the website or the YouTube channel, or you could even phone me up if you like. I'll be very pleased to hear from you.